After addressing the mechanical side with an engine rebuild, it was time to shift my focus to the fun part, the hull of my 1988 Kawasaki 650sx. First, I removed the existing HydroTurf. The previous owner had applied it to the rails and tray, so I made my way around the ski with a plastic chisel, applying heat whenever possible. Next, I would be cutting into the tray in order to epoxy some Hamilton's footholds. I began by creating cardboard templates, then transferring them to the hull and cutting with an angle grinder and reciprocating saw. Underneath, I chiseled the foam, test fitting the footholds as I went to avoid removing too much material. Once one side was shaped, I tried to roughly mirror the cutout on the other. To attach the footholds, I used rivets and the Fasco 110 epoxy glue. The epoxy is a two-part mix, which I thickened with a small amount of Capasil. It was far easier to work with than fiberglass resin, and the end result was fantastic. I liked this product so much that I used it on the interior of the hull to repair a section that had suffered a small crack due to impact. Although this area wasn't taking on water, I decided I feel much better about it with a bit of epoxy reinforcing it. Once the footholds were in place, I turned my attention to preparing the hull for paint. There were two layers of paint on the ski, a gray and a red. I used a random orbital palm sander with 80 grit pads to get through the majority of the paint. Then I switched to a 150 grit to remove the swirl marks. The front of my ski had damage to the rail. I tried to lay fiberglass, but quickly realized how difficult it was to keep in place while it cured and abandoned that for steel stick, a moldable epoxy putty that I've used in the past with great results. One more pass around the ski with fine sandpaper and a light wipe down with acetone meant I was ready to apply paint. I used the Krylon appliance epoxy in gloss white. It seemed to do well, covering the erratic mixture of colors underneath. Once that had dried for a day or two, I returned to apply the splatter paint. For this, I used Neon Glow acrylic paint from Michaels. To apply the splatter, I dipped small paint brushes into the acrylic, then swung them toward the ski in a random fashion. I was extremely nervous about this step, but as soon as the first line of neon green hit the white paint, I was ecstatic. It was just the look I was hoping for. A few days later, I returned to lightly scuff the paint and cover with a Krylon clear coat. The final step was the HydroTurf. I'd never applied this before, so I was especially nervous about pulling it off around the molded footholds. I used aluminum foil to create the template, as I could fold rather than needing to cut with scissors. The foil also did well to hold its shape as I worked from one end to the other. I carefully laid the foil flat to transfer the pattern to the HydroTurf. Then I worked from the front of the tray to the back, deciding which areas to trim or cut reliefs to help it wrap around the complex bends. Adhering the HydroTurf to the tray was accomplished with contact cement. One lesson I learned the hard way was to avoid letting the two surfaces touch as I wrapped the foam underneath the footholds. One edge did this, and I had to cut it and patch in more later. The cement works very well, but you want to make sure all edges are getting pressure to ensure a good bond. All in all, I was very happy with how the turf turned out. The final steps were reinstallation of the engine, gas tank, new bilge pump, and rail bumper. Now that it's all back together, I can confidently say that I'm happy with the end result. Not only is the ski good looking, but it's running reliably.